Going to stay on here until we get to the possibility of forming a task force. And now we're going to turn it over to Dr. Farina. She's putting her teacher hat on tonight, so get ready.
Listen, I'm not going to be the only one working here, right?
I'm excited personally.
So when we left here, there was some discussion related to looking at this data through the lenses of perception gaps, and I shared with the group that I would be working with administrators as well as students to collect their feedback on these particular results. And so there was homework related to this, and so I noticed that I put my pretty sign up there and with my terrible markers and said, for the purposes of our discussion, before I start telling you what folks said, I'm curious if when you looked at the data, you had any comments in those for those three questions. What surprised you? What did you feel was most urgent? And where's the greatest opportunity for improvement? So this is where, my former high school teacher hat is like, you can just give me the head shake that no, I didn't do my homework, and that's okay because we can proceed and then have conversations about those. We'll work in reverse order. Would we feel more comfortable that way? Yes, that's great. Yes. See, it's all about choices. That is.
But you're the teacher. You don't give them choices. You tell them
I
to do
certainly did.
And with every choice is a consequence.
Because
Some consequences are good and some consequences are not.
so I am a restorative thinker. Punitive consequences don't have a lot of progress. So let's talk about this. So there was a lot of data. There were 3 surveys. But what sort of devolved from our conversation last time was we need some sort of collective efficacy around what the next step is. One of my last sentiments of the conversation was there is a perception gap between what parents were saying, what teachers were saying, and what students were saying. And so I committed to going out and asking those questions about what they were. And you will find that these are the answers. Right now, in the day of AI, there were a lot of answers, folks. But I was looking for themes, okay? So we'll talk about what that looks like comparatively. But let me tell you about what happened with students. I worked with the high school administrators. Remember, students crafted the survey. Some of those students were in the library with us. We had 52 students were invited from a cross-section of the building. So we wanted to be really mindful of who was present. 52 were invited, 35 were able to come to the meeting yesterday. It was a wide representation of students. We wanted to sort of guard ourselves against picking the, I'm going to air quote, typical. The kid who's like having the best experience of their life in high school and middle school, we wanted everyone. And so there was diversity in that group. Now, they are the student executive board. And so if you're unfamiliar with the high school, students across clubs, leaderships, LEOs, esports, athletics, all kinds of things are invited to sit on Mr. Flanagan's executive board. It is invitation. And so they come and they talk about school-related topics. They got a whole lot of, me. And honestly, I said, hey, I'm back. And Ruth Padilla was one of the architects of the survey, and she's like, well, welcome back.
Yeah,
but remember, the challenge from the kids for me was, they're like, you always ask us all these questions, and you never tell us about it, and you never do anything about it. And honestly, that was a great opportunity for us to reflect, really, are we doing what they need us to do? So there were vice presidents, treasurers, people in, the media classes. I mean, just you name it. There were a lot of kids there. It was 11th and 12th graders, so we really wanted to try and balance that involvement. Our students from Dreaming Forward were there. Our students who attend the DVCEE events were with us also in and among all of those groups. So I want to share, because going through each of this, but I want you to have it, might be challenging, is that the students and the administrators, there were themes that revealed themselves, but maybe aligned a little differently. So those were the domains of the survey, if you need a reminder, right? So when we ask kids, like, what surprised you? What do you think is most urgent? What is our opportunity? They were shocked. They were shocked that so few peers report bullying and feel unsafe, right? So the kids sitting in that room, it's only a small sample size, right? Were like, why wouldn't you report it? Right? Why isn't that? Right? I think the teachers or the administrators were also like, why aren't you reporting it? So both groups agreed that safety and bullying is an urgent issue. I'm going to talk to you about solutions though, because I think it's different than what you think it is. And that's why that little tab is what this group's going to brainstorm, and then I'm going to share what the kids said after. Belonging. It was a really honest bunch. They feel very disconnected to teachers.
That jumped out at me when I read the survey data.
Yeah.
They feel, and honestly, our administrators were sad. Like, right, so the kids were like, ugh, and the administrators are like, that's sad. Right, so there's a different sort of emotional quotient around that data, but they both agree that that connection, that the relationship between students and teachers is a powerful element of climate and culture, and if you don't have it, there's trouble, right? And so the kids talked a lot about what that meant, and I will reveal exactly, they wrote for me what they wanted, but they said that's a huge concern of theirs. Students, when we talked about equity and respect, inconsistent discipline, and I think we all talked about that, they also felt there was unequal treatment based on student groups. The 35 kids gave very healthy example of how athletes are treated very differently than everyone else, and not in a good way. They are, the perspective was they were given more liberties, they were allowed to slide, comments like that, and that it's palpable and observable, and it's not nice. Basically, were some of the things that they talked about. And, I will say, administrators agree, there's inconsistency in discipline practices, even among disciplinarians. And they echoed those concerns. And students, both groups in their comments recognize there has to be a systematic fix to that. Instructional relevance. The kids were surprised how little their peers connected their future and what they were learning. But administrators said the same thing. Like they just, they don't. And administrators also repeatedly mentioned that they think students feel that way because their parents see less value. Particularly, you will see homework. So, somehow they equated relevance to homework a lot. So it aligned, but in a really different way. Students are they were sort of venting about it, but administrators are like, we think it's a failure in curriculum design. Like, we can fix this for kids. We can have a homework discussion that makes it, relevant, engaging, not new learning, those types of things. That's within our control. So positive, students really didn't mention a lot of positive things. But administrators wanted to highlight how good our teachers are, and that's a point of pride. Like there was a lot, and truthfully, there was a lot of data in there that was positive about our teachers. You know, we were looking at things from a glass half empty kind of perspective because we're looking for improvement. So I will say that the conversation in and of itself was tailored to improvement, and so perhaps that's why.
Andrea, do you know
Yep.
the administrators, their comments about having, our teachers are good, do they mean that instructionally? Because when you talk.
Yeah, I think in all areas. Remember, so this was what surprised, that they want to know that teachers are good. That's what they feel like.
But you highlighted a disconnect between
Yeah.
teachers and kids.
Yep. I mean, that's that perception gap that we talk about. And so, when we talk about solutions, if the people who are in charge of leading our buildings see it differently than all the other stakeholders, then that's different work that we need to do as an organization, right? We need to open perspective. We need to have honest conversations about, well, let's talk about what kids are actually saying, right? Does that align with your perception of what is actually happening, right? I mean, those are difficult conversations, but I think need to be had. So what is urgent? When you look both, they all agree, we have to prioritize safety and accountability. And administrators repeatedly said we needed to have structured intervention opportunities. Like it was urgent for us to get that in place. When they talk, you can read it, everyone believed there needs to be fairness and consistency. Again, what was urgent to kids is that they're not all treated fairly. So they didn't even, what surprised them was that, but then they said, yeah, we need to fix this. So both seek transparent two-way communication. They want to be able to talk. Administrators want teachers to talk to kids. Kids want teachers to talk to them. And so both of those groups said, hey, we've got to talk about what that looks like. Instructional purpose, what is urgent? The kids are like, please save us from homework. And they don't, and I will say through the dialogue, it was not because they were trying to get out of it. It wasn't at all. It was excessive. It was throwing them out of a life-school balance. It was not reflective of the lives that many kids lead, which is I have to go home and I go to work 30 minutes after I get home, or I have siblings, or I play 2 sports, or I'm on a travel team. And so, what they were saying is it's not that it's not that we're being obstinate. It's if it had value, then I would do it. I will tell you, our Western Center kids said, don't you dare take homework away from us. It is valuable. It is shaping our future career. We do see a connection. And so we saw in that library, kids are like, it's 100% relevant. I go home and practice the things that I'm learning at the Western Center. So you can see it's like, what? And then the kids who stay at the high school all day are like, well, aren't you lucky? Great. So there was that conversation. But administrators collectively agree, homework is intended to be for practice and automaticity, not new learning, and not a punishment. So we may have to recalibrate that discussion, right? So student voice, they want to be heard, and they want their feedback to matter. They want to see, I promised them I would be back, and they're like, you better be. And so I think we have to really emphasize listening. And then where do they see growth? Both seek relational strategies, and both groups say belonging could most certainly increase. That they want our curriculum to be relevant to life. I don't think any administrator or any of those students wanted kids to come to school and just be like, check, I did that. They want it to matter. Teachers got into teaching because of a love of kids and a love of pedagogy. And so if there is no connection, then how do we rekindle some of that for our kids? School climate, obviously, the administrators talked a lot about the role of PBIS, the impact of teaching kids the SEL competencies and conflict resolution and prevention. And then, you know, the kids focused on, I want a response. When a complaint is made, I want a tangible response. And so you'll see homework came through again, equity, talked about fairness. You know, obviously collectively they shared that. And again, students want some autonomy, they want choice, they want voice, they want all of that. And truthfully, when administrators were asked about the data, they want to build opportunities for kids to make those choices. And so, you know, it's interesting because I don't think that when either of the groups looked and answered those 3 questions, their responses were starkly different. I think what it comes down to is what our solutions are. And so I say that because, you know, how to best do this and acknowledge that the board, this committee, has committed to solutions, right? And so my job is to facilitate your thoughts on what you have seen from 2 of the groups, right? The kids, who are the reason we're here, the administrators who are charged with making things happen in the building, but the goal of this group was to come up with tangible solutions. So, Leah, I don't know if you want to brainstorm solutions right now, or you want me to show you what the kids want.
Hey, Andrea, can I just ask a real quick question, a little bit off target, but I'm just curious. In the EPS meeting, Art mentioned about kids need to feel safe and secure in order to learn.
Mm-hmm.
So with the survey, it seems like we're focusing on the high school, but do we know the intensity or the level of bullying per building? Like,
So I guess that question is, are you asking me if I could tell you how many disciplinary infractions there are for bullying by building?
well, I know you can.
Right, I
Yeah,
can.
You can.
I can tell you it is not a lot. So again,
But yet that's what everything's based on.
correct.
Yeah.
So, and I'll be very candid with this group, and that's why I want to take your direction and lead because you're the boss. But I was very forthcoming with the purpose of this group. Of course, they had no idea that this group existed or what we were talking about. So I said to them, like, you need, first of all, you're always invited to come. Second of all, I want you to hear that the reason that this survey existed was because we want to hear your voice and we want to know your recommendations. And the way that we crafted it was, what do you want me to advocate for coming back to this group? I single-handedly can't make things change, but I can advocate for the things that you want based on this information. And so that is what is hidden behind those
Door number 5.
those solutions.
I would like to, with this group, brainstorm some solutions to see how they align with what is behind the closed door.
Yeah,
I want to know what they want.
Well, I guess it leaves the boss here.
I'm
so.
concrete
We're going to guess
sequential. I
what
want
they
to
want
get
first.
first. Yeah, I mean, what does it matter? Well, we're not in their shoes.
No.
We're not living in that building.
I'm going to give you an 18-year-old idea.
You know, I could give you my ideas till the cows come home. It doesn't
So-
mean anything.
And I don't disagree with you, but I want to caution that opinion if it doesn't satisfy what the conversation has been about solving bullying. Right? So you don't know what they said, and of course it's a small sample, like, please. you saw that they said bullying is, like there is. There definitely is. But I think you'll be surprised at what they believe the reality of that is for them. And yes, this is high school, right? These are high school students that I spoke with.
And my guess is more about culture.
It's up to Leah.
Or was it any different than the Breakfast Club? Do you know what I mean? Like that,
Yeah, I do, yeah. I mean,
Okay.
they gave us very strong,
okay, good. Good, I'm glad they did that.
I mean, if we're
In
talking
the
solutions,
comments, they did that.
if we're talking solutions, I'm going right to athletics. And I gave you one of those books. And I told you what we did at State College with our leadership in athletics to shift that culture.
mhm.
And that's where I would start. 100%.
It just begs the question, right? And of course, I'm a contrarian with you, Peg. So I'm going to say what I told you was kids think that athletes get special
I was
treatment.
just thinking that,
100%.
I mean, we have to proceed respectfully and with caution if that becomes a framework for decision making. I don't know if kids would really appreciate any focus on athletics over everywhere.
But it's not.
No, I know what you're saying. I know what you're saying, but sometimes kids don't.
that's not going to be their perception.
Right, it might not,
Well,
I don't know.
Not until you get the vehicle moving.
Correct.
And then they'll see what it is.
There were no athletes in this group.
Yes, there were athletes.
There were? Okay, okay.
Yep,
So that's.
yep.
Or your suggestions, or we just?
Well, that's, I don't know, I'm waiting because I'm happy to write.
No, I really, just like, we don't have to take a lot of time at it. I would just really be interested to see, because when we did the survey, we wanted to hear the students' voices. They said when they were compiling the survey that we weren't asking the right questions. So I'm curious to know what we think are the solutions as opposed to what they came up with. And we don't have to spend a whole lot of time with it, but I also think that, we think we know the answers, and maybe we don't.
But you're saying brainstorm based on what Andrea just shared with us.
Yes.
Yeah,
I think
Go ahead.
what I would say is just one solution or one suggestion, it wouldn't be a solution, but it would help us, I think, is to make sure that we kind of take the time to retrain all of our principals, building principals, and administrators in how we are coding and dealing with bullying. Because to Peg's earlier point, we can pull data, but if Principal A is classifying this as bullying and Principal B is not, because they're not using the same measurement criteria, or they're not using the same litmus test, so to speak, then our data is only as good as what's being reported. And then the next step of that would obviously be not only how they're reporting it, but how are they dealing with it? How are they dealing with the students who is the bully versus the person who is receiving the bullying, and making sure that we're all on the same page with the expectations, because obviously it would have to be age appropriate, but we want to make sure that what we're measuring is truly measurable. Are we measuring apples and oranges, or is it all apples? I think it's really important that our team understands the expectations, so that at a very basic level, we know and we're confident that everyone's handling it the same.
That's what I'm talking about. That's the kind of solution.
And if I could just extend Georgie's thought, and for those in the crowd, if you're familiar with the PBIS framework, at elementary, they do that
Yeah.
very specifically with teachers, and then it falls off in sixth grade. That practice of collectively looking at disciplinary data stops.
Yeah.
So as I listen and as I process this information, I wholeheartedly believe that we should be looking at disciplinary data 6 through 12.
Do we know why it drops, or is that?
Why
too obvious?
PBIS? Because remember, PBIS requires intentional instruction, analyzing, collecting data, sharing it. And so we have long wanted PBIS to move all the way into the high school, and it hasn't.
Why?
So, right,
Why?
there is no good reason I could give you. But But, so when I think of that, I also think PBIS needs to happen in middle and high school.
Yeah.
Because then we're all singing from the same songbook, right? It's like, then everybody's speaking the same language, and our data, our disciplinary data will be true and accurate, or as accurate as it can be.
So I don't know where the problem is and why it doesn't, but principals, leadership matters. Leadership matters.
It does.
So,
And I think that if you know disciplinary reporting codes, there are a many, right? And so I think that there has to be an intentional look, and from people like me, to say, what is your quarterly disciplinary data, right? I suspect, in full disclosure, if I pulled it right now, bullying would not be reported.
6 through 12.
I don't know that. I mean, I'm hypothesizing here, but it,
You're right. I absolutely agree.
so, and because of the nature of the way it is described as an offense. So I think we need to just, as Georgie talked, I think we need to recalibrate that discussion and look at the data. I mean, you didn't see one piece of disciplinary data, did you? I can tell you right now, Mr. Vigilante could have showed you a spreadsheet of every offense, where it took place, what the consequence was, and what the lessons taught to those kids after the fact were.
Okay, but I'm not making excuses for middle school or high school, but he's dealing with 2 grades.
But also-
And you know as well as I do, when you start going up to the higher grades, it's more intense. There's a
Then you
lot
have
more
hormones
stuff.
involved, and you have all
But
kinds
There's
keep
a
in
lot
mind,
more stuff.
he also brings a unique perspective because he was a secondary administrator. So it's interesting that he, out of the 4th or 5th grade level, has it nailed. And Art's very, very good. And all of our principals are very good, but I mean, about this particular area. And he has a very good understanding of it.
Okay, sorry.
Sure.
Yes. So that's basically, that was kind of my suggestion, is first get the administration and the teachers on board on whatever the discipline is. Get them all involved, make sure that this is a priority in the school district. Like, this is an absolutely, so that goes down first. And once you have the structure involved, like everyone on board, then I think you have to go to the culture change, which would probably where the task force would come in, where we would, message to parents, maybe do talks, or whatever the task force comes up with. But I think if you don't have the structure in the school first, where it's consistent and exactly what you guys have been talking about, I think all the culture stuff's not going to work. If they don't believe that you're doing it, it's not. If you show the change first, I think the kids will follow it. And then, again, it's all about messaging, getting the parents involved, and probably the task force. I don't think the school can do it alone.
You can't fake this.
Yeah.
No.
Like when it gets to the teacher level and, you can't fake relationships.
Yeah, so if you show the community that you guys are trying and you got a structure involved and it is a priority to you, I think that could be what starts everything and catalyst for everything else. And then the task force can carry on the culture part of it and the parents. So,
Yeah.
What you said the other day about how it takes a month or whatever to look into it, the group that comes in to check it. But what do the kids get told right away so that they know that something is taking place? They're not sitting there thinking, oh, nobody did anything, and then a month later, maybe something's done based on the research or whatever that those people do that come in and do it. I don't know what all these things
It's like
are called.
establishing a KPI.
What?
It's like establishing a KPI, like a key performance indicator. Like
parents
that's,
need that too, because
Yeah.
we don't mean that in details, but we
Kids
need to be
just
sure that
think,
they are.
oh, well,
Yeah.
nobody listens to me.
Paige? I think a lot of things. I'm going to make this as short as I can. When in the last ad hoc meeting, I spoke to Dr. Roche, and I said, we have policy, so why does it feel like that's not being enforced, right? And he said, I don't like the way that he brushed that off, and I also didn't like his answer. I liked it, but I didn't like his answer for that. And it was that we need to have proof. And right, but if a child's being called a slur in the hallway, and there's no proof of that, so nothing gets done, well, of course they're not gonna be incentivized to report it, because without proof, what are you gonna do? And like,
That's fine.
so a middle schooler was being tormented and filmed on the bus. If that video wasn't passed along to a student who was willing to share it with administration, nothing would have come of that. A girl coming and saying they're videotaping me on the bus, they're making me uncomfortable, they're entering my personal space, they're threatening me. That has we don't have proof of it, so we're not doing anything, that's not good enough. And then furthermore, like was just mentioned, what are we doing with the student who brings this to the attention? They're the problem, and I've said this to our slate 1,000 times. For everything that we're not addressing, we're failing two students. We're failing the student who is externalizing the behavior, who obviously needs support, and we're failing the person who's the receiver of whatever that person's going through.
So what would you suggest would be the solution to that? Because I think we've identified the problems.
Yeah, so
And the problems, are out there, but what we need now are the solutions to the problems.
this would be developing something very similar to a task force. So I did not go to public school for high school, and we had a literal, because it was a private school, you would just be kicked out. There was a literal no tolerance of bullying. Because of that, we had a really unique thing, which was a disciplinary committee. And it was 2 teachers and a group of students, and they were peer elected. When there was an issue that maybe didn't have proof or wouldn't reach to administration level, you went before the disciplinary committee, and the person whose issue it was presented first, and then the person who's being accused presented separately and second. It was then up to that panel to decide how this should be moved forward, whether this went to the dean, how this went forward. Obviously, if their consequences as an elected body were, they weren't drastic. They didn't have the same kind of control that you or.
There's no expulsion.
Yeah.
Right, it wasn't like that. But the threat of having to look your peer in the face, the humiliation, the social mores, and the idea that that person that you just had to answer to will talk about it in math class.
And that's restorative justice.
That problem fixes
I was gonna
itself
say that last
so very quickly.
Oh, yeah, you're right, yeah.
And that's, so we have been working to gain traction on this very practice.
Awesome.
And it doesn't, so, not to share too much, but being a high school teacher and a high school assistant principal, I was restorative practices trained. I didn't have to prove you guilty,
Right.
Yes.
but you were going to have a conversation about it with the victim.
Yep,
Because perception is reality.
yes, exactly.
And so, but
But
I did not always give a consequence, but I always had a conversation with kids.
Yep,
And it was not, you could not participate, right? So, what we encounter when we run restorative circles now, or conflict resolution meetings, is parents say, I refuse to have my child attend, right? So you have to, and we have to honor them.
yeah.
So there's a balance, but I can tell you, you are 100%, when you have to repair the harm you caused, whether it's real or not, you need to be able to listen, right? Like, well, this is how I feel about that. And then, the adult thing to do, and that's what we're trying to model, is that we say, this is how I feel, and that is not okay.
Yeah.
And so, but we've been working right now at the high school, because our discussions administratively and listening to a lot of community members is, we've invested in trainers. We have 10 restorative practice trainers in the district. We've been training all, cycles of teachers for the last 3 years, but it comes down to, are we actually doing it?
Right.
100%.
And the students don't think you are.
They don't.
Well, and that was what I wanted to add on to that. I think that part of all of this conversation about how we're talking to the students and their sort of practices, we need to restore the students' trust in the disciplinary system
Mhm.
to begin with, because that's Paige, the student that Paige was just talking about was my daughter. And when this was all happening, she had zero faith that anybody was going to do anything for her. No faith. And I was, talking to people, and she's going, Mom, don't bother. Nothing's going to happen. And I think that part of this whole, solution, restorative, how are we taught, like, that needs to factor in really strongly, I think, because the kids have lost faith in the system as a whole, in the administration, in the disciplinary system. They don't have that faith.
Well, and I think foundationally, just because I can't prove it doesn't mean you're not a victim.
Right.
Correct, yes.
And so that takes care.
That validation, that's what they need.
And, that is a delicate balance. I don't want to, being a former disciplinarian, I don't want you to think I don't believe you.
Right.
But that takes a lot, that takes an investment in talking to humans about, here's what I can do, here's what I can't do. If I can't do X, but how can I help?
Right.
And I think that is the fundamental premise of restorative practices. And it has a lot of power. It has a ton of power, but it applies to adults too.
Andrea, I'm going to ask you a really unfair question.
Gee, never known you to do that
What a
before.
shock.
Yeah, like I never do that. And, if you don't want to answer it, then no. Do you think our administrators, and I'm mainly talking about our building principals and assistant principals, are vested in this community and understand the pain of this community? And I'm not just talking about the bullying stuff, but I've mentioned it in board meetings. The middle school, COVID, lack of trust, institutional trust. I mentioned in facilities or finance committee meetings about this building in the middle school and how we were kind of lied to as a community. Do the administration, do they understand the trauma and the pain of this community and how this community really is a tight-knit community and really does care for one another in spite of the challenges we face today, politically, societally? This is our home. And I hope they understand the pain and the emotion of this community, because this is so important.
So
It goes way beyond this community too, I think, because this is a national thing.
Well, but I'm just talking about us here in the valley. I'm just talking about the valley.
I, of course,
And
can't speak to how every administrator feels. That would be unfair of me to say, and I would not be so bold to do that, but I can tell you that from my job, which is to lead leaders, they are deeply invested. They are deeply invested in this work and the people that they work with to get the job done. And that I fear sometimes that a concern that they're not is misaligned with what we see them do every single day.
Yeah.
Now, I don't think you need to live here. This is where we might disagree. I don't think you need to live here to care about being here. I've been here, this is my 11th school year. I don't live here, but I care about everything that happens here. And so, our administrative team by and large has a long tenure. That does not happen. That does not happen.
Thank you. And, I just feel like, and this is just me personally, I feel like if we take care of this, that what we talked about in EPS will improve.
Well, that might be a great, I don't want to ignore anyone, but that is a really nice segue. Although I know, Liz, do you want to share something?
I did.
Trina told me she could.
Yes. I was going to
Well,
say
I know
this.
she talked about restorative practice because she does that.
Mhm.
And so she did want me to mention that. The meaningful intervention that needs to take place by administration, this could look like restorative practice. I was thinking also with respect, I feel like they respect for teachers and restorative practice, or respect for one another, peers, whatever. I think all of it, you have to have administration that is an authority, that are below teachers, and then, or above teachers, then the teachers are above the students. So there needs to be that respect. And if you don't have that respect, then you have complaints like the teachers were saying kids are rude to them, defiant. They refuse to follow instructions and do homework. They're blurting out stuff. That's not okay. Neither is bullying. And I thought you said like almost 70-some% witness bullying. That's not okay. If you witness it, then it needs to be written down. Like if you're witnessing bullying, a teacher is witnessing it, they need to write something down. The kid needs to be called in. It's not okay to do that. It's not okay to be disrespectful to teachers. And maybe they need to take them out. It's better to do it one-on-one than in front of a whole bunch of people. And it just, that needs to happen. And I don't think that's rocket science. I mean, that's just like.
No, and I can uncover some of those and show you student responses. But a huge portion of restorative practices is modeling that. And so, even now, right, and I am foreign to a lot of kids, like they don't even understand my job. They're like, well, who are you? What are you doing? Like, who's that lady who always comes over? But if I hear something, I'll just, hey, I heard what you said. I'm like, that's really hurtful. Like, I wouldn't want.